Curious if there was a news.
More of a committee.
This is more of a workshop.
It's more of a workshop, so if you wanna sit up at the table, I invite everybody to
For
sit
the
at the table.
public. They didn't go one follow the other. Public safety, like state designated. They
Thank
don't-
you.
Hey.
Sorry. Wanna say-
Where's your son? Hey, you know, man. Same rule for the plot. I can't see anything.
That was a beautiful bill.
Not in
They
executive
did?
session.
How many changes?
I don't know, that's up.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one.
Interviews for next week.
Yeah.
I'll make a breakaway.
Somebody's gonna have to buy
I think next year's be here for a while.
We have an overlap, it's like.
And the other wild cards, I have to serve on as a juror.
Gotcha. Okay, Honorable Treasurer Emma Lett is gonna give us a workshop on where we're at and how we got here.
Is it gonna be easier for you guys if I move over to the hot seat?
Yeah.
Is that-
Yeah.
Yes, please.
He's brave. You should have you outside.
That way we don't cringe our necks. I'm good. There'll be enough printing probably. So I want to start this with a little disclosure. I tried to be respectful of you all, and I've gotten feedback over the past years about, some of the treasury reports, if not all, are fairly dry. And I just throw a bunch of numbers at you. And about 15, 20 minutes into it, it's a lot of information very quick. So what I wanted to try this year, and we'll see how you like it. You'll notice it's a much smaller report than normal. And what I'm hoping is that today becomes less about me and more about a conversation. So as I go through the pages, what I want is to be interrupted. What I want is to have you ask questions. Okay, so this is gonna feel very different than what you're used to from a annual financial report. But I think especially in light of the workshop that we had last week at the old Masonic Hall in Hufford Falls, where they gave the presentation about budgeting and how that looks and feels. I really want to encourage an interaction, both with those of you who could make the presentation last week and maybe more importantly, those who couldn't. The unpopular message that I think was delivered, and it's nice to hear it from an outsider, right? Because I can tell you things all day long, and after a while it becomes the boy who cried wolf, and it's, oh, that's just Al, and that's, so you get to hear some of the same things from somebody from the comptroller's office. And what was very interesting is he doesn't give a hoot about politics. And he tries to help you make a rational decision in spite of any of the political ramifications. So one of the underlying messages in last week's training was do the right thing for your taxpayers and put the county in a position of strength, even if it's an uncomfortable decision. And that was an interesting message to hear, that if you need a 12% or 13%, and you can explain to your taxpayers why. Now, again, you have to be able to articulate it, right? You can't go to your taxpayers with 12 or 13% increase and say, that is what it is. You have to be able to articulate why, right? So I think that was a really nice message that was delivered last week, because again, he's not running for election. He doesn't care about getting reelected. And it's very easy for him to say, this is what you need to do. But it was really nice to hear the fiscal perspective on do what's right for the county and let the chips fall where they may. Because it was his true belief that if you intelligently spoke to your taxpayers and had answers for them, while they still wouldn't like it, they would understand. So I kind of wanted to start with that. You're used to this message from me. This isn't anything new. Inside is my thank you to New York State for the unfunded mandate. Skip page 1 because I actually want to end with general, not start with general. So it would actually be the carpool would be where we'll start, which is probably your page 3. I don't have them numbered and I apologize. They're not numbered, so don't worry. Yeah. Washington County carpool balance sheets. And what these sheets are,
So,
and I don't know that you've seen, I don't remember if I presented this style to you before. I shared this with our independent auditors for our independent audit, because this is a much cleaner report for them. I don't remember if I've sent this to you before, but this I think is easier to read than some of the other stuff that you've seen in the past. So, and this is a comparison of 23 to 24. And what I really want to focus on is, and thank you in advance. You know, carpool is one of the things that I continue to try to delve into. And it's, and you know, and that's not just because Deb's in the room, but I'm going to tell you, it's not because of the way carpool is managed. So my concerns with the carpool aren't about the current operations. It's about, are we a different county and is there a better way to do it? Because, you know, I've been here for 31 years now. It's very easy to sit back and say, well, that's how we've always done it. That answer continues to be more and more unpopular with me. During COVID, when the building was shut down, me and one other employee manned my office. So I literally had to do everything soup to nuts. And when my staff came back and I had questions, if the answer to those questions was, well, that's how we've always done it, that got tore apart and rebuilt. So I have less and less patience for that answer nowadays. I'm getting a little more crotchety as I go along, I think, but and hopefully that's a good thing. You know, and I like the fact that we have some new supervisors on the board, because they're gonna look at it and go, well, why the heck did we do that? Right? I love that fresh look at things. So one of the decisions that this board made was to change the rates that we charge ourselves. Because what we found with both the carpool, and you'll see this message again in County Road Machinery. I don't want to use the word mismanaged because that's really strong. We made some bad decisions over the past 20 years on how we managed our fleet and machinery. And if we wanted something new, we just bought it as long as we could justify it. What Deb and I discovered, and I thank her for agreeing to work with me, because she's the first superintendent that let me come down and actually sit with her. What we found was a couple of things. We weren't charging the right rates at all. The rates that we were charging barely covered replacement, didn't cover any of the overhead or repairs and maintenance. But more importantly, if we wanted a new excavator, not a replacement of one we had, if we wanted a new excavator, we put it in the budget and we bought it. The problem is, in order to buy that, you used money that was set aside for the replacement of something we already owned. So we were buying new machines with replacement money. When we finally discovered that, it was like this big, huge light bulb came on, and it's like, oh my God, we can't do that. So we got Brian involved, and we now have an understanding that fund balance money is replacement money for things we already own. If you need a new piece of equipment, general fund needs to fund that purchase. So new equipment has to come from new money, right? We have to stop taking our replacement money and buying new equipment. And I don't know that we're even right sized on the rates yet, because even though we might be covering the cost of replacement now, we're still not covering the overhead and possibly not covering the repairs and maintenance. What may have to happen, and Brian won't like this statement, what may has to happen is the fixed cost, like the personnel and fringe, may have to come from a general fund contribution, much like the way that we fund the county road fund. Right? Most of county roads operations come from chips, snow and ice, and that $11 million from general fund. We may find that the best way to keep carpool sustainable and healthy is that the machinery rentals fund the machines and we fund the personnel. So that will be a discussion that you'll probably hear at this year's budget process. What you can see on this sheet, and you're gonna see, and maybe I should start here because I don't know if I've done a good job on this before. There's a total fund equity number. And I don't want you to concentrate on that number because it's misleading. Right? Because if you look at 24 over 23, it looks like we went down. The important number for us to remember is the line that says assigned unappropriated. So that one line in the fund balance is what we really have in our quote unquote savings account. Because the appropriated number is the amount that we used to balance the 25 budget. And the encumbrances can sway all over the place from 50,000 to 550,000, right? So the number that you all need to focus on for your budget decisions is that line that says assigned unappropriated. And you see that went from 55 to 102. So we finally have our first measurement that your decision to alter the rates is starting to pay back. Now, are we at the right rate currently? Probably not. Probably not, but the fund got healthier, right? So phase one is a success. What I encourage Deb and Brian to talk about this year is, can we afford to bump it a little bit more? Right? Because remember, this money comes from basically general fund. Because the other departments pay into carpool based on the rate. So if we adjust the rate, that's great for carpool, but Brian's then got to fund a bigger number in each of the departments that has a car. Which would lead back to my argument, we should be looking at, are we right sized in the car? You know, if we have a department that has 5 cars, do they really need all 5? Or could we look at our county policies and procedures and encourage them to utilize their own vehicle? You know, the DA's office might be, you know, and Tony will hate this probably, but the DA's office is a great example. If an ADA has to go to White Creek for a hearing, would it be better to allow that ADA to go down in their own car, pay them mileage? And what's great about that is if they then choose to go home from the court, like if their day is able to end after the court is done, they're already in their personal vehicle and they just go home. Under the IRS rules that we're trying to educate the department heads on, if they go to White Creek for a hearing in a county car and don't bring the car back, that's a taxable event the next morning when they drive from home to the county building in a county car. So there are tax implications. So it's how inefficient is that we make people come back to the building? You might have an ADA that lives in Cambridge and just appeared in White Creek Town Court, and he got to drive back to Fort Edward. We had that with when Eric was our assessor. He would come here and get a county car to go down to work with Cassie and then come back to the building to bring the county car back and grab his truck. And the gentleman lived in Jushin. And that just seemed completely inefficient, but under our current rules, that's what you do. So again, I'm not criticizing the way that the fund is managed by any means. What I'm asking is there another way? Because remember, if we want to increase the rate to carpool for replacements, we've got to find that money in general fund. But what if we had less cars, which meant less replacement, which also meant less general fund paying in? It may be a win all the way around. And I'm happy to be proven wrong, but can we at least look at it?
Yeah, what's the rate on the mileage, right? See,
It's 64, Melissa, is that where we are? Yeah, you might. Is it 64, 69, something like that?
Yeah.
It's in the, what is it? Is it 50?
It's 50 something.
You think it's 50 something? 64, I mean, the federal.
Yes.
Well, but
We're not at the federal rate by any stretch.
we're not gonna get it right because we're gonna be predicting on usage. So that number is gonna be off. So we're not gonna get it right. But we're gonna be,
No, it's just like a budget.
yeah,
It's just your best guess.
it's gonna be our best guess on.
Yeah.
And so we gotta change policy, right?
I would encourage you to at least look at it.
Yeah.
So the other thing that might seem a little extreme, but may at the end of the day be more efficient. we love to make things harder around here, it seems sometimes. What would our world look like? And more importantly, what would Deb's world look like if her staff didn't have to track that at all? What if we looked at what all the departments were paying into carpool now? And Brian just did an interfund transfer for that dollar amount like we do for county road, a flat dollar. If over the past 5 years, the funds have contributed $670,000 to carpool fund each year. Instead of her department having to go through a billing 23 departments for 872 cars. Just appropriate a flat dollar amount, so zero effect on your budget, because you're just gonna take the money that's all it. If you took all the money in the separate lines and put it in one interfund transfer line. And that just became how general fund funded carpool. They're not doing monthly bills to each department, sending it to me to be journalized, recorded in the system. We literally go into the bank and transfer money from our general fund bank account. We pay ourselves. Where I literally have to physically move money to ourselves. It's,
Until we have to change the number of vehicles maybe in each department.
which
Because
hopefully
if we
go,
throw off the
which
ratio
hopefully
off-
goes down.
Right, but if it goes the other way, right, I mean, one goes from 5 to 10 and the other one goes from 10 to 5 and you don't see anything, cause we just give them a flat rate and then somebody's paying up, that would be a problem.
Oh, what's nice about it, I'm sorry, Supervisor.
Like in a larger department, do we have one employee set aside to just track mileage?
No, it's all done through the pump, through the gas pump.
So like DS.
There's a lot of staff time in her office.
I just wondered how much labor was done just trying to track.
That's
Yeah,
all.
she has to do a monthly report for everything in building department.
That's all.
And it's still a lot of paper too. It's not an electronic process. It's a lot of paper still.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, you wouldn't worry as much about replacement costs. You wouldn't worry as much about, are we stealing replacement money? Each year at budget time, the decision is, this is what Deb needs to buy this year. This is what we have to fund her. So that number could go up and down, or, if we were smart about it, we would start looking at carpool and fleet and the machinery, which we started down that road and stopped for some reason. But in our capital plan, right now, the only things that live in our 5-year capital plan are the basically the Matt Jones things. That's really all that lives there. We deal with the IT capital within general fund. She has her own reserve. But I think that to make good fiscal decisions, it wouldn't hurt us to start getting our other, the things we know we're gonna have to replace. It wouldn't break my heart to see them rolled into our capital plan as well. How many cars in the next 5 years, each year need to be replaced? We know that we're gonna buy, or at least our plan is to buy 4 plow trucks every year. Great, let's build that into the capital plan. We would have a known for years out. Mr. O'Brien, for as long as I've been treasurer, has been trying to get multi-year budgeting. And maybe sometime before the two of us leave this building, we may see that. It came up again in the comptroller's presentation, that we should be looking at least 3 years at a time.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
You're fine.
I would expand on that because
I want interruptions, remember.
if we look at history, roads, buildings, we stopped investing when we went down to 5 miles paving roads. What did it cost to get up to where we are now? It was a big cost to get there, and we're still not equal where it was. Same thing with equipment. We're going year by year by year. We're not forecasting what we're doing, not forecasting what expenses are. If we can't forecast, how can we plan? And the comptroller is exactly right. Unless you know projected costs of the next 5 years or 10 years, in some of your major equipment, you can't forecast your budget. You can't forecast your capital plan. We're too busy trying to not break the cap. And while I advocate we probably should at all costs, at what cost are we not breaking the cap?
And I think that was the underlying message of the workshop last week. Are you making a decision just to get to tomorrow, or are you thinking truly about the future? right? I think that was the message he tried to deliver.
And I think that's the hardest part with what his message was it doesn't matter how you plan. And that's what I told him. That state budget comes out, and if you had a 5-year plan when you came in November and passed our budget, it's out the window come May of next year. Just because they changed all the funding, mandated you something different, price of vehicles doubled, price of fuel went up. And it just, so the idea is good, but we've tried it.
It's almost like your
And we-
capital plan.
And I do it, yeah, I kind of do it all the time on my own because I have to do that in order to do the budget. I have to do that to know where we're going and to not cut off our nose to spite our face. And what I put in the budget, maybe I could come in at a 0, but is it worthwhile for us? No, it's not. And so I think that's the hardest one, is because if we were a business, and we would have a better chance at really projecting what people might buy than we do in projecting what the state will actually do to us, because it's off the wall. I mean, they stole our AIM money the one time, they stole sales tax the one time. I mean, they make things happen that there's just no way to think of what stupidity they'll come up with next. And you can't do enough to counteract all those things. So we do the best we can and try to get enough in each line where they belong.
Yeah, see,
Go back to because I didn't know when I was supposed to interrupt, but back to where we were talking about doing a flat rate. Or for an example, for the carpool, I don't have a problem with that. It looks like an efficiency and stuff. I just wanna make sure that we don't box ourselves in on a number, that we do build in, you know.
It has to be something like per car or something.
Builder builds
Yeah.
into it.
so
It's
if,
always increasing every year because the cost of what we're buying is gonna accelerate faster than we're putting the money away and.
and Deb already has a replacement schedule that she maintains. If we were to build that replacement schedule into our capital plan, that number becomes less scary because it's predictable. You can build even inflation into that number.
Not sure
Fairly.
anybody could have built in this past inflation.
That's true.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were paying $247 for a plow truck. Now they're $338 or whatever they are. You know what I mean? So it wasn't that long ago.
But at the same time, we also couldn't have built in the fact that our sales tax doubled from 2009 till this year.
Right, but we're talking.
You couldn't have built that in either.
Cost.
You know, that's,
Being in the mix of this with Deb and Brian too, and, back to the carpool thing, I don't mind if it was all one either. Maybe then we'd have, all the time she dedicates to billing, we'd have somebody who could get vehicles in all the departments so that we're having 5-year-old vehicles with equal amount of mileage instead of one with 12,000 miles and one with 110,000 miles on it. And we'd be trading off and we utilize them better and not need as many as we've talked about. Also, and it's absolutely nothing against Deb's department, but when we tried to look through some of those numbers and we didn't have all the reasoning, it looks like some of our maintenance and repair costs are pretty high. So is it pretty high because of the vehicle, or is it pretty high because we carry so much overhead? And you talk about budgeting for the future. If we are gonna redo this campus sometime in the next 5 to 10 years, and we're looking what to do with a carpool garage and everything else, if we were contracted out or something else, what we need is large of a garage sitting there, or a wash bays or things like that. Just throwing all this out there.
We're not doing our taxpayers any justice. We're not looking at those things. Enterprise does a fleet management system for other counties. Should we have a conversation with them again to see if there's any way or some hybrid of county owned and county leased, right? There's plenty of conversations if we're open to it. And they might all be terrible ideas, but at least you're open to hearing.
Have we done a comparison in the past to the cost of purchasing and cost of leasing?
When we first look at enterprise, it was not fiscally proof to make that decision. We looked at it, but it was a while ago. It was a considerable while.
I think it was just about when I started, so that was like 10, 11 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
The biggest problem there is when things get tight, you can go without buying new vehicles. If you're locked into a program, you're paying no matter what. That's just the way it is. Not that it's not costing you because you're keeping them and they're getting more wear and tear and you're gonna have maintenance. But you can at least stop the money flowing out. I mean, you take a lot of things out of your control in those situations. But like Al said, if you're talking about, do we even need the building and, even need the carpool people involved? If you just have the company do it, maybe that does change the needle. It's worth looking at and knowing in advance of doing that stuff.
And I don't think I would look at enterprise again until we were comfortable that we were right size. Because if we were to go to enterprise now, we'd say we need 83 cars. Maybe like fantastic. When 5 years from now, through our studies, we might decide that we need 27 cars. So I don't think that the lease agreement is feasible for us until we know for sure that we've right-sized the number of cars that we're using. Right? That's just my 2 cents.
And I would think we'd also look at
Jamie does
local
an
dealers.
amazing job, but he's one person. He can only do so much.
Well, am I allowed to?
Of course.
So we have 5-year plan for both County Machine and Harper,
Correct.
but you know, you guys don't. Like, our plan is hindered by the budget process, you know,
Yep.
so things get cut, stuff, you know, so do you think that having a capital 5-year plan is gonna help our agenda as well? You know what I mean? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. I truly think it would.
And then with the rates, we set the rates here at the county for car. But for
Correct.
county machine, we use FEMA. rates.
Correct.
Basically, because that's, you know, we used to use state rates, just so everybody knows where we're not making these up and making them low. You know, that's.
Well, the state didn't change them for 7 or 10 years, which they were way off.
Changed 2017 rates, so I did change them in our budget. And then finally, and I raised them a certain percent every year, so we did, you know, we all worked together on doing that. But now we use the FEMA rates, which I think is a fair rate to use, but, so just to kind of defend my department.
Well, I don't think there's anything to.
No, I don't think there's any blame, so I don't think.
I think
there's
the department's doing a great job.
any- Yeah, no.
But I just think that we have a duty.
To just
To
need a
look at-
different
to look at
way, a
everything.
different way of doing things.
Yeah, what's your, you know, someone asked me or told me a long time ago that, you know, sometimes you gotta understand how we got to where we are. How did we get the rates?
So originally, the rates are self-derived internally, expected with a carpool fund.
Not the value, the methodology. Why are we using rates?
So when the carpool fund was created,
It's set up like.
that was the,
It was set up like the county road machinery, which is basically, I think that's something we have to do, right?
so with these special revenue funds, you do these billings to yourself.
Rates.
No, I think we have to do a county,
Oh, the machinery rental?
yes. I think that's done by the state, so I think our administrator at the time said, you know, if we did this with carpool, cause what would
That
happen?
same model.
You gotta remember boards change, right? We had a board when I first came here that Bob can tell you, they squeezed the nickel, the buffalo on the nickel to whatever. And so
Yeah.
anytime something happened, all of a sudden you didn't buy any cars, you didn't buy any trucks, you didn't do anything. And so I think he came up with a plan to say, hey, if it takes care of itself, that's not the fight to have. You will fight on things that are important. Whereas this way, you're never out of vehicles, you're never out of machinery. You've got the stuff to work with. It was all about having needs and not wants. And so this was a way of making sure everybody had what was needed in their department. Not that I like this department, they get everything, and I hate this department, they get nothing. That happens. It still happens today. So we kind of got to be careful of that and look at everything a little more globally.
Well, yeah, I know, I'm not disputing, I'm just, because as a methodology by which to manage. You know, that's fine. It was just a decision.
Well, and then the
to use
rate,
this model.
and by having a rate for each car and mileage and all that, your department was more in charge. If you give them a flat rate, they can say, that's all I gotta pay. Okay, I need 20 cars today, we can take off, right? Because that's my rate. And that's why I think it's set to the car so that if you expand, you pay more money. If you downsize, you pay less money. So I think there's a little more initiative there.
And in theory, Supervisor, if the rate is right, it would generate its own replacement.
Yes.
So the methodology works. I think if the rate is right, the problem with getting the rate right sized is it causes some heart palpitations on the general fund side. Because the number probably is more, is probably larger than we would be comfortable raising it to. But again, if we continue doing what we're doing, we're making decisions to get to tomorrow
I
and not
understand.
to my grandkids tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I understand.
so
I
we're-
understand the long-term look. I'm
Yes,
just-
we,
Before you change the methodology, right, just evaluate the pros and cons of the methodology. There's a little more admin to it, but it's driving behaviors at the department level.
Yes.
So if we're incentivizing certain behaviors at the department level, if you make it a flat rate,
You took that away.
just asking the question as we go forward is before we make a change, evaluate if we're gonna lose something with the change that
But
we
if-
need.
and if you're right sized, I would argue, I don't mean argue with a negative sense. If you're right sized, flat rate wouldn't change behavior because they can only have what they can have.
Right.
And depending on how it goes by use or by department flat rate would be paid at the beginning of the budget cycle and the other is paid at the end of the budget cycle.
So flat rate, so the way that we do county road fund, and that's the model that I'm talking about. So Brian says, Al, I need $11 million to operate county road this year. What I do is I move them money as needed. So I might move 200,000 this week. I might move $250,000 on payroll week. So I chip away that $11 million, the small little transfers, to leave as much interest as possible on the general fund cash.
But at the same time, the vehicles we bought 3 years ago and haven't arrived yet are all encumbered. So the cash is still being utilized. He hasn't moved it over yet. Cause they haven't shown up. He hasn't got to pay for them.
And you'll see that when we get to the county
But-
road machinery fund, you can see that it looks like we're holding on to a bunch of cash. The problem is,
It's
in
really spent.
5 minutes, that cash can be gone when I get the
Yeah,
invoice.
the truck pull in
So-
and unload.
So,
In the meantime, I'll keep the interest on.
well, and let me pull the string on this concept then, please,
Sure.
again, of the behaviors, right? Not what they want, but what they actually need. So we've had a conversation before, the chairman's brought this up, several of us been talking about it. And that is, there's no limit to this quote unquote service, right? We don't limit DSS with services, we don't limit. It's irrelevant because we say we can't. We're gonna have a conversation then to say, we're gonna limit.
Find out how
service.
we can. Yeah.
But we can drive the conversation by saying, no, there is a limit to service. And this is your limit.
Right.
You only get 4 cars. Figure out how to make it work. But then I can't go to all my meetings. You'll have to manage the schedule differently. You'll have to manage how much service you provide.
You would be amazed at how creative our departments can be if they have.
Well, we don't want to get them too creative because that can be.
No, but I mean,
too, but-
necessity is the mother of invention.
Right, it is, but I guess my point is, if we wanna start the process of controlling. What
Behavior.
the behavior and well, budget, it's, no, this is it, you get this amount,
You work within this frame.
right? We heard that last week. Can't come after the fact and say, I spent the money, sorry,
Yeah.
we get that bill all the time. And we say, oh crap, Brian, do cheetah flips, make it work, Al. And you're sitting there balancing this out. You're not balancing it out, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul,
Absolutely.
but it's a different mindset. We have to say, ESS, you only get this. That's it.
It's okay to tell them that they don't need 14 cars. It's okay.
Well,
They'll make it work.
Yeah, there's 10 of them are parked there, so you know you can make it work.
Matter of
But they
fact,
might need it for an hour a day.
Yeah.
look, I'll tell you what,
you need a want.
I will extend the commissioner some credit, because she just sent an email yesterday to her staff. And she has a process now that I think is what we've been asking for 8 months. I think that she finally understood. So sometimes it's a communication problem. I think we finally got her to understand what we were asking. And not why. Right? So many times we worry about why we're asking the question and we get defensive. I think she finally heard what we were asking.
So I want to get back to forecasting.
Sir,
Forecasting, what you talked about, Brian, curveballs thrown us. it's all the more reason to do forecasting.
When I always do it
Because,
because of that.
well, I know, but we need to be better at it because if curveballs, if we take from, route from Peter to pay Paul, we'll know what the impact is on the Paul we're gonna seal from. Well, that's 5 years down there, 10 years down the road,
And
especially
if
with
we know
capital.
earlier too, the earlier you know anything's gone wrong, the better. But they understand. Our own department heads understand the timing of the budget and all that, so you get the information when it fits best for their narrative, not when it fits best for our narrative to correct it.
I
That's a
understand,
problem.
understand board, the more they understand the forecasting. The better job
Absolutely.
we're gonna do
Yes.
in making yes or no decisions, or maybe decisions or pro decisions.
Well, and the thing is with the software available to me, we actually have the ability to have like a multi-year Excel spreadsheet. You can actually plug in a decision that you make and see that decision
See
play
see
out
what it does.
in the out years. And that's really something that would be a huge benefit.
For us to see that information.
Correct. I know that,
And more importantly, understand what the impact.
I know that Brian is doing it because he comes to me with questions and more importantly, comments. But you all aren't seeing his work papers behind the scenes, and that's what Dave is asking for,
Yeah.
is a more formal presentation of the out years for everyone.
And I think that goes back to what the guy's comment was, when you put all that effort in and you walk away and it's on the table or in the waste paper basket, you're like, well, why did I bother? And that's what happens when you put in all that work.
If these are on the table when you leave, I haven't done you any service at all. These are something that you can be able to carry with you from now through the budget process. This I'm hoping you get to use as a resource document. And I can make it available to you electronically so that you can just pull it up on a phone or a laptop and not have to carry the piece of paper. It'll be with the minutes, but I'm more than happy to provide you with a PDF of just this packet as
And
well.
for those of you that were here when Dana Half was here, it was always interesting. He would bring his actual budget. And you could tell it wasn't like he just brought it. It had been opened plenty of times with plenty of creases in the pages. And he'd say, well, what's it do to this line right here?
He had the one with all the transactions, he had the
actually-
original like presented budget.
Yeah, you actually had an appreciation for that somebody actually looked and cared. You know, so that's not a bad thing. If everybody was doing that, we'd be better, to be honest.
And I know that you guys are taking it a little bit more serious. As a matter of fact, Supervisor Tall recently shared with me a usage sheet on some of the carpool cars. One of the best sheets I've seen in a long time, but somebody finally took the time to, to scrub the data and say, hey, let's take a look at this. So I'm encouraged that people are actually, understand that there is something here. And carpool and fleet, as you start feeling the 2026 budget pressure, fleet and carpool might be some of the low hanging fruit because it's something we can control. Brian and I are gonna talk to you today about some of the things that are out of our control and are absolutely maddening. This is something in our control. And there's a lot of dollars involved when you take carpool and county road machinery and mush them together. That's a lot of money at your discretion. So anyway, is there any supervisor?
First, I want to say that right sizing our fleet is fair. At this point, it doesn't seem like we can really seriously go forward until we know what we can and what we can't do with the fleet. And, I kind of like your idea of every department gets their money, but to Brian's point, we can't pull any of that back once give it to them, right?
You can.
You do. So,
You give it, you take it away.
well, in my experience, my short experience here,
Is you won't.
we won't. And, that's,
One, it would be bad for the department too, if they thought they had this, and this to work with in their whole plan. They have plans too out 2 and 3 years. So if you give them this and then you pull it all back, now you've screwed up their whole plan. So you gotta be a little careful. There's gotta be a lot of give and go.
So the beautiful thing about my plan, Supervisor Hahn, is the money doesn't go to the department. You take the departments completely out of the equation. And Brian just works with Deb on what number does she need to make the 2025 budget work. Is it 250? Is it 300? So instead of Brian taking that 300,000, spreading that over the DA and the 15 departments that have cars, rather than taking the
Just
number
its
that
own
she
budget
needs and spread it out over the budget, just do one interfund transfer for 300,000 and you're done.
then-
That's what I'm kind of.
And that's where Daryl was saying, but then you've taken out of the department hands of controlling it. And that's the scary part too, because you want your department head to control those costs and not say, oh, that wasn't in my line, that's fine. Go ahead, take the car.
And my fear is that Deb's department will still have to do all of the tracking.
They will.
Because she internally will still want to know how many miles on this car,
When
what
it
was the
was-
repair and maintenance.
When did it
So-
get tires? When did it get?
So it may
like
take the billing out of her hands, but I think all the tracking is still gonna continue, so I don't know. There is a payback, but it might be smaller than I anticipate.
With that kind of system, Al, how do you, what do I want? to call it? Not control, yeah, but it is control it. So you say DSSU, 5 cars is all you need. And they're into August and they've been using, their 5 cars are all used up. You say, well, you aren't going anywhere for the next 4. I mean, how do you control those costs if you're allotting a cost to them and they continue to do business as is?
So there wouldn't be any cap on their usage, so usage wouldn't no longer drive the number.
It'd
The
be
number would-
priority, as he said.
So what's nice about it is if you agreed with me that DSS didn't need 14 cars and they only need 9, if you agreed with that philosophy, if I'm wrong, the only harm to the department is there might be a couple of days next month that one of their employees has to go over and grab a carpool car. The worst thing that could happen if I'm wrong is that they have to go sign out a carpool car.
Or use their.
Or use their
private
personal vehicle, which we
personal
could,
vehicle,
which
would
we could
change the
discuss
policy.
as an option.
So why don't we take them away and have everything scheduled out of carpool?
So
Solves
we do that,
solves the problem with, assigning cars when some are only use 0.6 hours a day.
so it doesn't, because we have to continue to have DSS owning cars because we save a crap ton of money.
All of them, yeah. Can they be
So
signed out of
they-
carpool?
They own them and operate them for at least 3 years before they can distribute them out.
For any other purpose.
So that process, I'm not looking to blow up that process. That process works fantastic. Now, the footnote to that is, it's not the 75-25 that you've been sold for years. We found out. It may be a different mix of rates that you're getting back, but at least you're getting something back. You're still not paying 100% of it. That car is still gonna be, that car is still going to be donated to Carpool at the end of its useful life, which we've determined to be 3 years.
But
What
that's the legality.
What I explained to the commissioner that made her a little bit more comfortable. Tammy, my first proposal to you would be this. For the next 3 years, buy 3, take 4. So over the next 3 years, her fleet would go from 14 to 11. Right? But it would be done over 3 years. So the beautiful thing is, for 3 years, Carpool is gonna get 12 new cars. 4, 4, and 4. So Carpool
Semi-used cars.
is gonna get 3-year-old cars. 4 of them instead of 3 for 3 years in a row. There'll be 12 3-year-old cars donated to our carpool. That Deb doesn't have to go and buy new cars for. They probably have very little miles on them because I get to see them out my window. Right? So, and here's the other beautiful thing. If I'm wrong, if I'm absolutely washed up and completely wrong on what I believe to be true,
Well,
you're only 1 year at a time into the process, and you can call stop at any time. If after year 1, you realize I was wrong, you don't do years 2 and 3. If after year 2, you find out that's the right size, you say stop. And you might find out that after year 3, a real number is 9, and you want to do that for 2 more years. So 2 more years, you've put 20 new cars into the carpool fund over 5 years. Over 5 years, you put 20 cars into the carpool fund that Deb didn't have to buy. I think we're making a mistake not to at least talk about
Right, the only caveat to that is those cars are coming in with a lot more miles as you dwindle them down.
it. But the carpool cars are things that we use as needed. And
Right.
it's okay if it has 20,000 miles in it. Who
We'll
cares?
rust them out before we.
We'll rust them out before we drive them out.
That's been our problem with probably, what'd you say, a quarter of the cars in the last 10 years that
We,
left?
yeah, we
They've
don't,
rusted out now.
we shouldn't be owning 2007 anythings at this point. It's not good business. It's not safe for our employees.
Well, you can't sell them for anything at that point either.
Well, and we used to buy cars without air conditioning, with roll-up windows and,
It's
We bought
minimum
the-
as you could possibly.
and so they had no resale anyway. Nobody wanted them, and then you let them rust out, so nobody really wanted them.
Now, and if I remember right, and I might be wrong, when we get to the County Road Machinery Fund, I think this is the first year of the program where you're buying 4 trucks a year. And so it's a 6-year replacement cycle.
Yeah.
I think we're now through the first 6-year cycle. So there's gonna be some 6-year-old, there should be 4 6-year-old plow trucks leaving our fleet into the auction block. We should see a substantial difference in the resale number. Number one. Number two, that might be a wonderful opportunity. How many of you are driving at the town a plow truck older than 6 years?
Most of them.
Most of you.
Most of them are
Right?
20 years old, yeah.
But I mean, I've worked with a lot of the towns, I've gone to visit some of your town halls. Some of your plow trucks should be in the Smithsonian. We have an opportunity now with 4 plow trucks coming out every year. Maybe the first option should be to a town before,
Well, I
the
thought we
auction
already
block.
discussed that anyways. that
Well, and I think it's a good-
DPW putting them out to the towns for the auction, that's.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if I'm right, if I remember correctly, this should be the year that first group of 4 is coming out.
But you almost have to put a minimum or something because
You still have to
Right,
get
yeah,
some.
right.
you gotta do something because there's no way the county can afford.
But
to
then
give them
but then
that.
we're only bidding, right, have a minimum, we're only
Well-
bidding against ourselves instead of outsiders coming in with more money to push it out.
What I'm gonna get myself in trouble for, because I'm gonna footnote this by saying I have to ask the comptroller a couple questions first. What there might be an opportunity for. And I don't wanna say the F word, because I don't wanna finance you. But is there a mechanism where those 4 trucks that we're going to, in theory, sell to a town? What if you didn't have to go get a band for that truck? What if you paid a monthly payment to the county or an annual payment to the county at 0, or I might not be able to do 0 legally, but what if we were the financing agent to that truck? I need to make sure that that's legal
Yeah,
first.
I think you'd have to get as much interest as you're getting at the bank at least.
So there may be some restrictions in finance law or county law on what I can do for you. But what we do right now, though, is we have outside agencies that pay us for things. I wanna look into what might be available to you all to finance the truck and not have to come up with the cash straight up.
So I would think, given this discussion, that should only be interim anyway, because the town should be doing exactly what you're doing.
Correct. This would be a bridge.
Borrowing for trucks anyway.
This would be a bridge, yeah. Supervisor,
I think we'd have to be careful and make sure there was a minimum, because that money that you would have sold that truck out on Auction International would have made more money than you probably are gonna send it to a municipality. So there'd have to be, you have to figure out the sweet spot that you aren't crippling the county budget to help the town. budget.
well, and I think
That
we owe the taxpayers that anyway.
I think you're a
Right.
taxpayer.
I mean, if you
That's
sold
not
it
the
to my
taxpayer.
town, my taxpayers would be happy, but it really wouldn't be fair to Dresden taxpayers.
But if
because they
we're
get
wearing,
the
if we're wearing our
benefit.
county hats, that would be a due diligence effort on our
We
part
have to
anyway.
make sure.
Any other questions on carpool?
Well, the other side of that too, though, looking at it from the truck perspective, if any town does buy one of those trucks, a lot of what you buy with a truck is history. And we all have the history with that truck.
You know the maintenance record, you know the repair
You
record.
know, if you do spend $70,000 on, you have a pretty good idea of what you're buying versus something on Auctions International from Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, Carfax, yeah, Devfax.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, what, were you else have a comment? Yep. County road machinery will go faster when we get to it because we've had some of that conversation in advance.
I'm sure that's what you're going in.
County road is next. So the concerning part for me for county road, right? And this came to me while I was sitting in the room last week at the presentation from the comptroller. Because I had these numbers fresh in my head because I had just prepared the report. So remember the line I told you to concentrate on? The assigned unappropriated. Now, here's what scared me about this, because last week I found out from Deb Donahue that they had this large rollover number added to their chips. Of like $900,000,
So that's right in here.
but it should have been, and it's not.
So that would make it about equal.
So what scares me is that we, the collective we, made a decision to appropriate $1.2 million of our fund balance, $900,000 of which was actually rollover money that we needed anyway. We may find as we prepare the 2026 budget that we have a problem in County Road. Right? So we made a decision, again, we made a 1-year decision to get to tomorrow. What we needed to make the 2025 budget work was $1.2 million. What we didn't know at the time this budget was passed was that 900,000 of that money that we took is money that she didn't spend. So we may find as we prepare the 26 budget that the contribution from general fund has got to be bumped up a little bit because we should have done that for 25 and didn't. So we may have kicked the can from 25 to 26. But again, it was the decision that we needed to make 25 work at the time. We didn't know at the time that there was $900,000 of rollover money.
Nor at the same
did they.
time, though, they added to the CHIPS funding, so it may work out. It's hard to
So-
know yet.
As we see 25 start to solidify, as you go through the budget process, we'll know more. Well, my guess is that Mr. Campbell is not gonna have very much money to appropriate in County Road this time.
The salt is gonna be the biggest problem.
So not only will he have to come up with the increase in the salt costs, the whatever the negotiated increases are in the personnel. Well, he then also has to add to that the $1.2 million that he plugged with fund balance last year. Right, so he basically has to get back to a balanced budget, which is $1.2 million before you start. And then add to that the 2 increases that we know about. So he may have a couple $1 million in county road. It's gonna give him a little bit of a heart palpitation. If 25 is going the way that it was planned in the budget, Mr. Campbell's probably gonna have to find an extra $2 million. And that might already be on his radar.
The only good out of that is that 1.2 million of that we just moved can be used in paving and not used out of what was budgeted unless she paves more.
Now,
If she sticks with her same plan,
The
that
good-
money's still there.
the good news is
I
that
think some of those for roads that didn't get done last year.
it's
Yeah,
a specific road.
Still, but it still won't change anything. Cause you're replacing money with money.
May or not
So
be
that-
anything.
So I think that one is basically gonna rely on the salt price where that actually goes.
What's good about the 900,000 though is there will be revenue against that. So I'm less I'm less nervous about the 900,000 because it does have an offset revenue to it.
Now, what's the 1.9 million jump in equipment?
Where you're at.
Halfway down the middle of the sheet there on the county road fund,
From 4 to,
from 4 to 5.9.
it's your equipment rentals.
Oh, and the revenue expense.
It's your
Yeah.
equipment rentals.
So again,
paying
that's
yourself.
one of those gold stars for the board moments. Again, when Deb was here, she talked about, she now uses the FEMA rates to build a county road machinery fund. But again, so
So
You-
this
you know
is
me,
her expense on the equipment
Yeah.
that's being used out there.
Our own
So-
question.
Okay, so she's
we're
building
funding-
in the funding on the other side.
Right, so that's going to the.
the downside is that comes from county road.
Yeah.
So that increase in county road machinery is fantastic. The downside is it's funded from
Right.
county road.
But at
which
least
is
we're
why-
justifying the machinery costs.
We're
More
right
accurately.
sizing, we're right sizing our county road machinery finally. We right size it on the back of county road. Which county road then is right sized on the back of general fund. So it all still flows from your taxpayer contribution.
All trickles down.
Well, not only that, we were, if I remember right, our interfund transfer about 4 years ago, I think was 11 million. At one point, we actually lowered it.
We got down to
And-
9 or 9.2 or something.
Well, yeah, we've actually gotten down, well, at the peak, it got to 11, and since then, everything's gone up and we're still at 10. That explains why the fund balance has had to happen to keep it going. So there's a lot of things that are gonna have to be right sized because like Cassie said, no one could have predicted the inflation. And of course, begin with the things were gonna fall back to the price level. Nothing's gone back to the price level. Not one thing. It's gone down. So if that's gonna be the case, now you gotta, and that's why I'm saying 20% on the sale or on the real property tax is because if you gotta do this, let's right size everything to once, cause this seems to be the new normal. I feel bad that it got here the way it did because of what happened to DSS. But now that you're here, let's not swat the taxpayer every year. We already know they're getting swatted, we just don't know how hard. Let's try to fix it to the point where we can be a little more generous going forward in our increase, or less generous in the increases than what it's gonna be this one time. It's not gonna be good this year. There's no way to get it there that I can see.
And again, when you look at any questions on county road? My only cautionary tale there is, as we work through the 2026 budget. We may have a little bit bigger gap than normal to try to patch. County road, sir,
Although right sizing, we have to override the cap this year, because I think we should right size everything. Salaries, whatever we can do to bring people up to par with their peers. Might as well do it all at once.
and it's refreshing that you're open to having that conversation.
Like it, but
Well, what's interesting, and I won't take a lot of time today, but we will have a future conversation. No later than this time next year. So I would be respectfully asking you to override the cap in 27 anyway. Because of the large pilot that's coming into the county. I don't want to get into that conversation today because that could take literally the rest of the afternoon. I want to have a whole separate conversation. Because not only is that going to be an important decision for us here at the county, there's towns that are a part of that pilot payment as well. And I want to make sure that all of the towns have the right information. So that not only are they planning successfully for their tax cap compliance, but more importantly, and Supervisor Wilson and I have had this conversation, more importantly than staying within the tax cap, which is a fictional piece of paper, right? It's politics, it's not real. More importantly than tax cap compliance is your exit ramp at the end of it. Are you planning for what your town looks like at the end of the pilot? I'm more concerned about your exit ramp planning. Right? Supervisor Fisher, your town had a really, really significant experience. And what happens when you don't plan an off ramp to a pilot, right? I want to make sure that all of you that are affected by that pilot not only are planning for making your 27 budget work, but you're making your 2057 budget exit ramp strategy ready as well. So we'll have that conversation.
And that's good analogy because the assessment on the property went up to $17 million. They knew there's a dropout point and they didn't plan it properly.
But again, I'm not casting dispersions on the town. I'm using it as an example of, hey, we do need an exit strategy. It won't be us sitting at the table then, but let's help the people who are.
Hey, I might be.
You,
Gonna be sitting next to him.
Am I?
you're not gonna have our here too.
I've got back in lunch.
I'll be watching which call tomorrow.
Warm and tropical.
Yeah.
So
I hope that's how good.
He let me know.
the county road machinery fund.
Yep.
Again, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that because it's really the same conversation that we tried to blend into carpool. You may see that $2.9 million and go, those guys are flush with cash. The problem is when you go down about 3/4 of the way to the encumbrance line, there's $2.594 million of trucks out there on order. So the minute they come in, that check's getting written. So yes, they're flush with cash right now. But if those trucks were delivered tomorrow, that bank account now is $500,000. So just, which is why I really want you to, again, the line that matters is the unappropriated line. Now, to you all's credit, it went from 29 to 390 because you worked with Deb Donahue, agreed to raise the rates, which you have to fund through county road. So again, these are budget decisions you've already made. The fruit is starting to bear, it's starting to bear fruit, right? The decisions you made 2 years ago are finally starting to trickle through the budget process. So that's great. But let's not take our foot off the gas. Let's continue the conversations. Sewer 1 and sewer 2, I won't spend a lot of time on, but I do. You still have a fiduciary responsibility to know what's going on there. The one I'm most concerned about is sewer 1. And the executive director and I have had long talks about, and Mr. Fisher, you probably have heard, some of my concerns at the commissioner's level. They didn't even have enough cash to make their bond payment in March, right? That had to be funded through the money that was still left over in the capital project that they borrowed. They're starting to get some of that cash flow in. They've got a large, they had $136,000 in user fees outstanding at the end of the year. That's a big number for them that's a big IOU for a fund that small, right? They only carry $114,000 fund balance. So what they were owed was bigger than their fund balance number. That's not, you don't normally see that. So the executive director is aware that, and sewer 1 used to pay sewer 2 a flat $2,000 a year. We changed methodology 2 years ago where sewer 2 now bills them for actual man hours. The problem is that number jumped from like 2 to 12. And there was no increase in the user fees right? So this year, when it came time for sewer 2 to pay sewer 1, we actually had to pause the check issuance because they didn't have enough money to pay. Now, thankfully, we're paying ourselves. We continue to pay Queensbury late, right? So Queensbury's raised their rates. We have to make sure that, and I know that talking to the executive director, he's working with the commissioners on trying to right size this fund too. But again, this fund gets balanced on the backs of all the businesses that are in the park. Right? Sewer 1 is basically your IDA park up by the airport. That's who funds this fund. So any increase in debt service or O&M is on the back of all those businesses that are up there that are just trying to survive. Right? So there's the balancing act for the commissioners on, economic development versus the fund stability and finding, what can we do?
And being familiar with that project in the IGA park, that was caused by not putting an ad valorem on users to pay for future improvements. Future planning.
Again, that's a recurring theme that you see. And all we can do now is fix it going forward, right? We can't dwell on the past. We can learn from it, but we can't undo it.
We can't wait forever.
So sewer 1 was really the one I wanted to kind of get on your radar, that there is a cash flow issue there, but the commissioners and the executive director to my knowledge, are actively working on correcting. So you may see some increases in that fund for 26, I'm guessing. Because they don't have a choice,
Are there less users in that sewer district one?
considerably less.
It's just business.
It's a very small group
But
of
even
users.
just 1 year,
I'm sorry,
in just 1 year, it looks like there's less users. User fees,
so usage may have been down. So it not necessarily less users. It's metered. And to Mr. O'Brien's point,
Yeah.
there's supposed to be a couple of factors in that bill, not just the usage, but there should be an ad valorem like sewer two. If you're in sewer two's district, in April and October, you get a usage bill. But in January on your town and county bill, you also get an ad valorem that funds their debt service. That's the same structure is supposed to happen in sewer one. But again, to make it,
User went up,
Either way.
2023 went up by 50,000.
no, it went from 145 to 140, if I'm reading it right.
In 24, yeah.
down.
It went down, it
IDA and the user fees,
went from 145 to 140,
receivables,
not receivable. Go to this back page where the revenue is. You don't want the receivable to go up. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's an IOU.
And what's the recourse then?
So it depends on what property it is. So if the property is one of our properties, it will get re-levied on their town and county bill. And then we can enforce on it should that bill not be paid. The problem we have with sewer one is the out of district users becomes a whole legal matter because we have no way to re-levy those fees. It becomes getting the sewer district's attorney involved, possibly taking them to court, and are you spending more in legal fees than the bill was to begin with? They've got one bill that is a large bill right now because somebody wasn't billed for like 5 years. He wasn't in the group of bills, but he was receiving the service, so they're trying now to catch up and work with that owner to pay back the years that they weren't. Sewer two, there's not a lot to report there. What was encouraging until this morning was I saw them finally building their capital reserve back up, and their capital reserve basically is supposed to be for capital needs and debt service. Right now, thankfully, what they're levying covers all of their debt service and puts a little bit in the savings account for tomorrow. As that long-term control plan continues to grow, eventually the outnumber that I last heard was 26 million. Is what the long-term control plan project is going to eventually, they're borrowing that money to make that project happen. There'll be a point where that ad valorem is either just enough or needs to go up to make the debt service on that 25 million. To their credit, they're using EFC as much as possible. So they qualify as a district for 0% financing. So what's nice is, yes, they're borrowing and yes, they have debt service, but at least it's at 0%. It's on principle. So
But if we end up, that was my question before, so there's a cost on us putting the money up front for however long that gap is, there was.
But it's their money. It's not our
I
money,
know it's not the county money, but it's still somebody's money, that was just my
the
question.
district.
Right. I'm just saying that if it takes whatever you would, so let's just make the numbers easy. If the money that they had in their capital was sitting somewhere earning interest at 5%, while they wait X amount of months to get the money at 0%, that they still should pay back. They still should be making up that interest that they count. At a 5% interest or even a 4% interest, that's a significant amount of money on that many dollars that we were blocking this month.
so it's,
Right, I know it's still from themselves, but, so like if I
So what
borrowed
they
from
pay?
A to pay in my account, so if I needed money in highway from general and I had to take a loan back and forth, and I put it back in A, I have to put it back in A, the dollars for dollars that I took, plus the interest rate it would have made.
It'd be the
at
same
time.
people paying it.
I know. it's-
You only have,
Paying yourself.
you only have to do that because it crossed funds.
Right.
These monies don't cross funds.
These don't cross funds, so you would,
Alright,
cause it's.
that was the part I was worried about,
Yep.
because they're like, as if we qualified for zero interest, or in my world, qualifying for zero interest is fine and dandy. How much money are you gonna pay while you're waiting for that to process and paperwork get through? That was where my question was.
So
But
here's,
if it's the same account, then I guess I don't.
oh, and I can make you feel even more comfortable. I've worked out a deal with EFC, cause I'm cheap as they come. So I make the sewer, not make. I've requested the sewer district provide me with this month's bills by the first Friday of the month. Which is still, I mean, I think Stacy asked for them on the first Wednesday. I asked for them on the first Friday. The agreement that I have with EFC. Sewer district sends me the vouchers for the long-term control plan. Right now, there's only two vendors really doing the whole project. Because we have Wendell managing, all of the subs. What's beautiful about the agreement that we have with EFC, I send them a drawdown request with those vouchers. And we have an agreement that if they review the vouchers and they're compliant, they release the funds. I now have the funds the Thursday before audit. So I don't even have to front sewer district money month to month. I'm actually getting the EFC money the Thursday before I cut the check. That process is working fantastic.
EFC is a deal.
Yeah, so EFC has, while their paperwork and their management is a nightmare, once you get in the shoe.
Kevin's really good at it.
And
Kevin.
yeah,
Well, you got a big grant when you first arrived to take care of a lot of things.
yeah, Mr. Brilling and I started the battle with them, and Kevin has been a little bit more successful, so I don't know if it's his delivery or.
I think it is.
But anyway, we definitely, we have a good working relationship with EFC. They understand the cash flow needs, because these aren't $10,000 vouchers. They're $500,000 a pop, so.
Right, so makes me feel better, but yeah, even though the sewer district doesn't affect us, still wanna make sure the sewer district. is-
Right.
You're overseeing.
You're still seeing, making sure.
So now at that point, when you receive that,
Check
Money,
check.
and it goes, and the interest made off that money stays with the county.
Basically 1%.
So to continue the bad news, it's an overarching theme in the report this year. The next fund is the self-insurance, health insurance. And this isn't gonna be new news to you. You've heard this for 2 years in a row. And again, this falls under the category, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the shame, right? Carpool, on the road machinery, there's decisions you can make to help the county survive. This is a place that there's almost, I'll say almost nothing you can control. You can't control if there's 2 or 22 people that get cancer this year. You can't control if there's 8 or 80 people that need mental health drugs. You aren't gonna play God as a board, I hope, on what medicine we're going to dispense. So the fund is what it is. It may feel like we took some growing pains when we went self-insured, but when we sat down and worked with the broker, all we found out was we took a monthly known number and we traded a known monthly number for ups and downs. So we're not paying any more than we would have paid under the minimum premium plan. We're just paying it in waves. So I might have a $100,000 bill this week and $300,000 bill next week. And all the minimum premium did for us was I paid $500,000 a month flat. But they kept all of the surplus if there was any. And they got all of the drug rebates from the drug manufacturers. So if we're not paying any more money and we're getting the benefit of the surplus and the drug rebates, I think we still made the right choice. If this was 5 years ago and our high cost claimants were still only 4 and not 11, the fund would be growing. So while the fund isn't healthy right now, the good or bad news, depending on how you look at it, is there's nothing you can do to help it. The only thing that you can do, you've already done. The budget officer came to you and asked for $1 million to infuse into the fund, and you said yes. Which was great, because all you did is took some of the surplus from 23 and invest that into the health insurance. That was an amazingly smart decision, because you have a fund balance policy that says we're gonna keep 20% of our operating balance in general fund. Anything over that number, you should be investing in something, whether it's the capital plan, the health insurance fund. So I commend you on when Brian came with the ask. I think you put $1 million into health insurance, and I think you put $2 million into the barns. We as a county should be feel very blessed. We're building 2 highway barns to the tune of almost $12 million without debt. We have no debt on our 2 barns between the ARPA funds and the fund that you've invested from 2 years of surpluses in 22 and 23. So thank you for that. I mean, we've done some things right, and we're really good at acknowledging all the things we did wrong. Let's take a minute and realize that you've made some good decisions too.
Yeah, before we borrow for payroll.
We've, one of Brian's least favorite things is we have debt service on roads and bridges. We borrowed to pay. He doesn't ever want to do that again. And nor do I think we should, right? But we did. We didn't have much of a choice if you're gonna have any kind of paving done at all. So self-insurance, health insurance, does anybody have any questions even on how the fund works? Because I don't want to assume, especially with new faces, that you even know the structure of this fund and how it works. So,
I have a question.
of course,
Medicare Advantage for people that are retired or at that age of retirement compared to, say, Highmark. Is there a way to, it's almost like we're double funding. It's not self-insurance. I'm looking at like school are facing this issue. In retirement age is getting greater and greater. Yeah, we're getting standard insurance with a Highmark when we could possibly be getting Medicare Advantage.
so you can only get Medicare Advantage once you retire. While you're an active employee, regardless of age, you have to be in the.
So do retired people pay into Highmark? Say,
Yes, so if you're in the Highmark, so if you're under 65 and retired, you're paying into this fund. If you're 65 or over, you're paying a premium to Anthem as a Medicare Advantage plan. That's our carry for Medicare Advantage is Anthem.
Yep.
So this one we pay claims, Anthem we pay premiums. But the premium is very, the premium is very low. And you made a hymn of change a few years ago that when the retiree spouse at 65, you no longer cover them. They have to go do their own thing once they hit that 65 trick. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I think I heard you say now that we're just accepting the volatility, but isn't it cheaper overall?
Yes,
Yes,
Right, so I mean, we're
Yes, if
much
you-
cheaper to self-insure.
if you tried to
Yes.
buy that same thing today, you'd be another couple million.
and I guess that's what I didn't, I
Yeah.
didn't explain properly. That even though it feels like a bad decision because the numbers suck,
No, that's great.
it was a great
Right,
decision.
if you went out if you could actually get the plan that we were on today, you'd pay another 2 or 3 million.
And if you liken the self-insurance plan to an investment portfolio,
Just follow
this is a
the-
long-term investment. So don't look at the past 2 years as your rate of return.
Mhm.
10 years from now, you'll start seeing a smoothing and you'll see that it was the right thing. Because again, if there's any surplus, you're keeping it. If there's $600,000 in drug rebates, you're keeping it. Right? So not only do you have control of the plans, you can dial up and down the benefit structures. Right? You can decide, and you may hear from Melissa at some point during the budget process or Danielle. So you can actually take some of these funded dollars and invest them in programs that hopefully do have a return. We have a significant number of employees that don't even have their annual checkup. Well, you think that that's great because if they're not getting their annual checkup, we're not getting billed. Fantastic. The problem is the reality of those people, the people that aren't getting their annual checkups end up being a high cost claimant because when they finally do get sick, it's catastrophic because they've gone so long without any checkups or detections or, so we want to make sure we're incentivizing annual checkups. Things like, you know, go have your colonoscopy or colorectal exams. Those, it's the simple things that we as an employer can choose to incentivize those.
And we have, not to
And-
interrupt you, but you have before it. I mean, we
Right.
just
We-
increased the benefit time
right.
to encourage people. to get
We've
those
done the
rates.
things to lead us into
Yeah.
the chute, but we can even invest more dollars in the actual wellness plan. And I think there's some carrots that you can lead the employees with that, and I don't mean that disrespectfully. But people are human, right? And there's things that incentivize us all differently. And so there might be, and if you can give an employee a $50 card to Starbucks, and I'm being facetious, obviously. But that saved you a $8,000 claim. Was that $50 worth it? Probably. And I know I'm being a little bit funny about a Starbucks gift card, but I'm not far off what is actually possible. You can incentivize that wellness behavior because the statistics show you will spend less than if it's just ignored. Anyway,
We do a $50 McDonald's card.
sorry,
We do a $50 McDonald's card to negate all of that.
food truck credit.
Now, wait a minute, Charlie Call told me that the cheeseburger at McDonald's has less calories than a cheeseburger at Stewart's. So,
That's grease. That's grease. Neither one of them. have
oh,
meat.
well, I'm just telling you.
It'll do it at anything.
There is.
Generic meat. Wonder.
There is a small beacon of light as we get to the back of the report. And the self-insurance workers' comp fund. We actually grew by $300,000. So we actually took in $300,000 more than we paid out in claims.
But that only works if we pave the parking lot. Cause we're only one fall away from losing all of that.
I knew he couldn't help but get to the parking lot sometimes.
This was the parking lot, not the.
But we'll get there. We haven't got the general fund yet.
Yeah.
So again, my exuberance is short-lived because I also realize that just much like the self-insurance fund for health insurance, you can't control this. Again, 2024 was a good year and you had less claims than you had money coming in. But you're only one, snowplow backing into an employee away from, and yes, that actually happens, by the way. You're only a couple of,
Where does the revenue come from? Let's go. with
So,
that.
that we actually changed in 24, we actually changed, or 23 for 24, we changed, or was it 24 for 25? 24 for 25,
Yep.
we actually changed the local law to make it a little bit more user-friendly.
For the town.
You had to have an advanced degree in biomedical engineering and an associate's degree in math to even figure out how we got to the number. It's now much easier. So we now take the actual claims and we spread it over the participants in the fund.
And the towns pay a portion, the county pays
The
a
villages pay
portion,
a
and the
portion.
county also pays a portion of EMS.
So we pay 100% of all of so we still have PV legacy claims and they're finally falling off after we sold the place in 2014. But the county also funds 100% of the EMS and fire. So those agencies don't pay into the fund. We as a county cover those costs. And it wouldn't surprise you to know that most of our claims come from police and DPW. They're the two highest risk jobs in our pool. You're gonna have the most strains, pulls, twists, it's just the nature of the job. When Richie Moore was here from Fort Ann, him and I actually sat down one year and thought about funding the self-insurance workers' comp fund like you would fund an actual insurance agency. And you actually applied rates to the job titles. So, a clerk in Al's office might pay, $20 per unit. But a jail or a jail guard or a sheriff might pay $80 per unit. Right, so we had actually considered, funding this workers' comp fund like you would fund an actual insurance company. And even that was a little bit harder than it needed to be, but it was easier than what we were doing at the time. This current formula, I can't speak for Melissa, but I think her and her team have embraced it because it's a lot less man hours coming up with the number. So that's, I mean, the one shining light in this whole packet is this fund actually did come back to, now, would I like that number to be bigger? It wouldn't break my heart. But sitting at 836 at year end, I don't think it's terrible at all. What concerns me a little bit is, under our formula, our next funding is based on our past experience. Right, so if claims were down $300,000 in 24, the amount that her department is going to plug in to the 2026 budget is gonna be $300,000 less. So we have to hope that in 2026, we continue to have a good workers' comp experience, because your 26 revenue is gonna be based on what your 24 actual was. So it's still a balancing act. The good news is though, is you're never more than a year away from right sizing. So even if you feel a little bit of pain in 26, that will be right sized for 27. So the change in methodology was still the right thing to do. It's just, there's no foolproof way to say, I know what claims are gonna be next year. It's just not a thing.
With those fluctuations now, would it be smarter to leave that money in the budget and then be able to roll it over the next year, like get
Yeah,
it?
it's its own fund.
It's its own.
It's its own fund, so it does stay, yeah.
It does stay.
Yeah.
Now, earning interest. What I heard you say that might not be what you said is you could still take whatever the allocation is for 24, but fund it. You could still fund 26 at the 25 level using the 24 rates is what I thought I heard you say. So instead of, well, what I thought you were asking is, instead of dropping the revenue 300,000, could you leave the revenue flat
Yeah,
and just use the same? So I
think we're at 100,000 if you want a little
If-
foreshadowing.
if Argyle was 12%, you still charging 12% of that full number, not of the actual number. So that would be an interesting conversation.
I think it's just more, paying it forward,
Right. The
There's
problem.
money
the problem
waiting
you-
for you, but you're covered for the curveball.
Yeah. So the problem you have with this fund is how that's figured is actually in the local law. So if we do anything other than what's in the local law, you have to change the local law again, which it's not that hard, right? You set a public hearing, you have a public hearing, you pass the law. It's not rocket science. It just takes 2 months to happen. So if during the budget process, you feel that needs it, that you need to adjust it, you adjust it. It's plenty of time. The next couple of pages, I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on, but I thought it was important that you have them. And some of you may say, well, this is where you should have spent all your time, and you might be right. But I'm trying to respect your time as well. So these next couple of colored pages, they show you what we said in the budget was going to be the net cost for the department and what it actually was. And the page that looks like this, with the smaller recap, those are the top 10 both ways, because to me, your departments like social services, that we got it completely wrong. It's as important to me to look at the other side too. So there's the top 10 people that we got it wrong by a lot on the negative way. But I also provided you the top 10 we got it wrong on a positive way. So to me, it's just as bad to have 10 departments that had a huge surplus because we either took fund balance or taxpayer money that we didn't need to. Right? So if Brian appropriated $3.2 million of fund balance, but we returned, you know, $1.5 million in surpluses, we appropriated too much of our fund balance. Now, the good news is, here's the good news. It still stays there. Right? So that's why I don't panic. Those surpluses, if we get it wrong on the surplus side, the good news is we just get the money just stays in fund balance. So, but we have to be careful. If we get to a balanced budget where Brian's only appropriating $1 million or $1.5 million, because to me, $1.5 million is still a balanced budget because we're gonna have $1 million, $1.2 million in payroll breakage every year. It's truly unavoidable in our operation because we make departments budget for every position they're allowed that. Nobody's fully staffed all year. And
We don't know which department it's not gonna be.
and whenever somebody leaves at a 20-year rate, they're gonna be replaced by a 1-year rate. That will continue to happen in this operation for as long as we're in business. Right? So to me, if he comes to me and says, oh, I need $1 million of fund balance, to me, that's still a balanced budget because I know he's gonna get back $1 million minimum in that payroll breakage. So the surpluses don't scare me as much. What would scare me is if we're at that million and we still have $2 million in surplus, because then we've overtaxed, or we could have done something different with that money, like a capital investment. So that's why I give you the top 10 surpluses as well. Because right now, when the surpluses are less than the appropriated fund balance, it doesn't shake my needle. But when the surpluses become more than the appropriated fund balance, we didn't make the right decision somewhere. Because we could have reinvested that money in our 5-year capital plan, in the health insurance fund, in employee salaries. There's something else you could have done with those funds. Because it's not healthy for the county. While it's politically fun to say we're gonna lower taxes, it's not the right financial decision for the county to have. Right? We've learned that even zeros aren't a good financial decision for the county. They catch up to you. They really do.
Nothing gets cheaper.
Nothing gets cheaper. The other thing that Brian asked for yesterday, and I'm glad he did because I kind of like it. This page right here. This shows the revenues by source on how we're funded in the general fund. So how much is real property tax? How much is sales tax? How much are miscellaneous taxes? Local sources are basically all the things that are like user fees, equipment fees. When I charge a taxpayer for a tax search, those are all local sources. So basically, any revenue we take in that's not a tax, not state and not federal. So for you guys at the town, when you're working with your town budgets, any of your revenues that start with a 2, that would be local sources. Right? So your 1,000 series, those are tax items. So if you kind of think of your town budgets, that 1,000 series in your revenues, those are tax items. Your 2,000 series, that's your local sources. Your 3,000s are state aid and your 4,000s are federal aid. So that's kind of a way to help you to interpret this chart. So if you look at this chart and you see, local sources related back to your town budgets and all of your revenues that are like 2s, all those departmental incomes that you get, the permit fees and the planning board fees, those are all local sources.
I guess I'm amazed that there's that much. And I think you're listing off some.
So what I didn't do that I thought about doing, because this is artificially inflated. I'll tell you what. The local sources. Thank you, Mr. Hahn. The local sources on this chart, unfortunately, are going to include things we pay ourselves.
Okay.
So when any place there's an account called 2801 interdepartmental revenues. So all of the money that the Office of the Aging pays the sheriff for the meals is in this number.
Okay.
So what would be an interesting scrub of this data at a later date would be to remove from this chart all of the things that we pay ourselves. What are the monies that truly come, because I don't care about left pocket, right pocket money, right? If I went from the sheriff's department to, or excuse me, if I went from aging to the sheriff, the money didn't even leave the bank account. See, it's, not only is it the same county, it's the same bank account, right? It literally became a book entry and no money actually changed hands. I'd love to scrub some of those numbers out of this chart and see what it really looks like when you remove the stuff we paid ourselves.
Yeah, I think what's interesting though also is over a 10-year period, didn't have a significant change in your local sources or your miscellaneous taxes. You know, we got more state aid, got a little more federal aid, but
Look at the sales.
I see the sales tax jump and
Yeah,
the property tax.
just like the state, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem.
But it's,
And it's because they mandate the spending.
Yeah.
Is really the truth of the matter.
but in the pie chart down here, all right, you gotta look out by percentages. And the percentages are, except for the real property taxes, they're pretty close. The percentages over, like I like that you gave that chart. We see this up here, but that pie chart, the percentages
Yeah.
didn't change a whole lot, even though each individual might.
Which I think is an interesting
Yeah.
story, right?
I thought that was very interesting.
But your state went up 3% to 17, but how much did their mandated expenses go up on the expense?
That's what part that's missing.
What you don't have here, and shame on me, because we talked about it and I just ran out of time. The backside of this sheet should have the expense side of the equation. And what I wanna, and I may still show you at a future finance meeting. I may bring this sheet back with the expense on the flip side. That shows you the same pie chart, what breaks down by 0.1 for your personal services, 0.2 for equipment, 0.4 for contractual, 0.8 for fringe benefits. You know, the 6 is for debt service. Again, the same numbers you use in your town budget, right? Those numbers will click with you because you're doing that at the town as well. But I think I think it's just as important for you to see, you know, because like Brian said, he has a suspicion that if we looked at payroll when PV was here in 2014, we're probably back over that number again without them. You know, I jokingly, but the year that Mr. Shaw was budget officer, I wanted to change the cover of the budget to Here We Grow Again. Because it just, all of the savings that we achieved had already been eroded away. We divested ourselves of the nursing home and we're already back to the level that we were with them. We divested ourselves of the transfer stations. We're already back to the level that we were with them. Do you know what I mean? So it's unfortunate the way that, again, it's inflation and what are you gonna do?
Payroll's like a hit.
But you've lost all of the benefit. Now, that doesn't mean you made a bad decision. Could you imagine what the number would be if you didn't do it?
Right, so you didn't lose all
You
the
didn't
benefits.
lose the benefit. It just on paper looked
They're
like,
unrecognized.
right? So what was said when we were kicking around the 8% sales tax, you know, as a way to try to help this fiscal picture. Brian asked me to calculate, well, Al, if we stayed within the tax cap, say, you know, because his original plan was if we go to 8%, it was gonna be an extra $10 million or whatever the number was. We will invest some of that into the budget, but we need to invest some of that back into the taxpayers, right?
All I did was to lower the real property.
The whole idea was to lower the property tax and still make the county budget sustainable for the future. He had me run the numbers. If you stayed under the tax cap, how long would it be before we got back to the levy that we're at right now? So how long would the taxpayers enjoy a decrease in their bill? And the sad thing was, it was only like 6 or 7 years.
Now it would have been one or none.
But
It would have just barely covered, just lost.
But it was kind of just, it was kind of saddening that gesture and because I don't think 6 years is a long time. And 6 years would have just been eroded. Now, again, when you run the scenario, if you didn't do it, and you know, it's still a less number than it would have been, but it's not less than it is today. So it depends on if you're a glass half full or glass half empty person.
Delta would have remained the same.
If the sales tax revenue grown at a greater rate, so if sales revenue continued, it would last longer than 15 years.
That was that online tax. book
Yeah,
that we
mine
got.
was the only thing that really grew it.
Which is a great segue to the next page.
Well, I have a question on
Yes,
your
sir.
sum of top tens. Some of the bottom ten, some of the top ten, it's a net 5.1 million, isn't it? Your short summary page.
As long as that formula is correct, yes.
It looks
No,
like-
you can't. That's, so I'm afraid that the 5.1 is the total from the page previous. Oh, maybe not.
It looks like that's the net of the red and.
And that number would make sense when we get back to general fund and you see the decrease in fund balance.
Okay.
So unfortunately, the positive number is a negative, right?
Yeah, that's the variance.
So the variance,
Okay, that's what I.
so 5.1, even though it's in the black, is actually the bad, is a bad number.
It is, yeah, that's,
Right.
I took me a moment to get
It's
that.
counterintuitive to what you would want.
Yeah, it did.
When I first looked at it, I went, oh, that's good.
So in this
That's
case,
not
black, in this
Black
case,
is
black is
bad.
not good.
Good old Al tried to trick us again, yeah.
I made you feel good for a minute.
Can't do anything with the specific numbers, see?
The 5 million matches your previous, the upfront. money.
So you'll see that that kind of has a relationship to general fund when we get back to.
So Al, for like 2014 revenues is 224. Is occupancy tax and mortgage tax and miscellaneous? Would that be-
They're in that miscellaneous taxes line.
Yes. So even with those, we went down from 4% to 3%.
No, I think.
Yes,
It's probably true. Is the
As
percentage
a
of all of
percentage,
it.
as a percentage.
as a percentage.
The number went up
Right.
500,000, but as a percentage.
Percentage went down.
Now, and again, that's a good segue to the next page, which is sales tax. So I really don't have any grasp on what in the world the state is doing. So we saw in the first quarter where we had four negatives in a row. And then all of a sudden, we were $418,000 of the good magical. Which, come on, that's not real. What was concerning is I actually, yesterday and today, got deposits in that I was able to, so I reprinted this page this morning. Because today's deposit was already in this morning when I came in. So what's unfortunate is we dropped $92,000 this month. And the $359,000 you see in red is actually a reconciliation deposit, if I got my schedule correct. Those are the ones that concern me because reconciliation deposits are when they say, okay, Washington County, we gave you X, the returns were Y. So we're gonna adjust your deposit. Most times they get it wrong the other way. Most times we're owed more money. So this time they're saying, Al, we sent you too much money, so we've got to dial back a little bit the reconciliation. So I hope that $92,000 decrease isn't a sign of our slowing. The one thing that I hesitate to talk about, but I have to because it's real. Don't forget that on, was it March 1st? The state started collecting sales tax on the short-term rentals. So we've yet to see that start trickling through our deposits.
Gotta be close.
So it's gotta be coming in the next couple, I would think. So based on the returns that we kind of know about, we have a volunteer agreement with Airbnb. Home Now or whatever that group is called, I have a return from them that they just sent me. So we have a little bit of a handle on what some of those gross numbers actually are. And we'll be getting 3% of those numbers here in the very near future. So the short-term rental sales tax disbursements may hide a downturn and our actual disbursements. So it'll be interesting to see. Because we were also told that I'm not gonna be able to see that segregated out. So there used to be a line where you could track short-term rentals. That's now going to be blended into another line that already exists, so. I can ask tax and finance for a report that I can slice it out of. But at the end of the day, you don't know if there's gonna be any benefit, because again, it is what it is.
Right, we can't control that.
But if they started short-term rentals in March, April, and May are not biggest time periods in the fall, the winter, and in the summer, the short-term rentals are most prevalent.
And what I don't know, Mr. O'Brien, is the sales tax being collected at the time of booking or at the time of stay? Because it will matter. So when is their charge card charged? When they book the room or when they actually check into the stay?
And is it held in escrow until you stay?
Right,
By
so
the
that will,
company, yeah,
that will matter a lot in the timing.
it's right, hell.
Because I might be booking now for, my ski trip to Aspen. So am I paying for it now or am I paying for it when I check in? Most hotels, you don't pay for it until the end of your stay.
But you're paying a deposit.
You're paying a
in a
deposit.
room, so, because they don't want to refund the sales tax if you back out some period of time.
So,
It's unlikely that they would book their sales to their income when it doesn't collect.
you would
So
think,
they're probably not forwarding taxes either.
No, they're not
I would-
forwarding anything.
You're just numbers.
Well, I thought it was just a hold on the credit card.
sometimes there's a hold on the card.
Shows up as a.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Wilson.
One more question on.
Good luck with your
miscellaneous.
duty.
Cannabis, have you gotten anything, has that been figured out yet?
So right now, we have 2 towns and villages that we've received money for. The village of Hudson Falls and the village of Greenwich. Now, the village of Hudson Falls, the town of Kingsbury opted out, but the village gets to keep all of them. Greenwich, the town didn't opt out, so the village and the town share equally on whatever that remittance is. I was blown away, and I think Melissa and Brian were as well, when we saw the actual gross sales, especially in the village of Hudson Falls. It's a decent sized number. So though, we've seen the first couple deposits of that. Now, the revenue that we get from it isn't that large. But I was really surprised by the gross sales, because they show.
Goes right up from downstairs.
So. I can't even touch that right now. So that, but I don't see that number going down anytime soon, and if anything, I think you may see more open. It's getting more and more common as I drive. This weekend, we drove down to Albany and back, and I was surprised they're a little more common. And they're popping up.
Yeah.
They're popping up. I don't know how many more you'll see in Washington County, but I can't say that you won't see
And
it.
cannabis.
There was one short-lived in Granville. They were only in Granville for a couple of months, right, Dave?
Well, I don't even know really what the status of that place is. It's been resold. And, nobody's been there at all.
They weren't part of the remittance this time, so I assumed that they were done already.
Yeah, and then the one across the border. That kind of. Like a dud firecracker, lit up bang, and it's out of business.
Too much private competition.
So
Too much private competition.
Yeah.
the next,
What do you higher quality stuff?
the next page. The next page in your packet, I want to try to get you in here fairly soon. We haven't even talked about general yet, so. The next page in your packet, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it occurred to me, one of the things that you never hear from me is a full-on summary. So you hear about capital projects, one project at a time as the department head needs something. But I don't think I've ever reported out to you, or I haven't in a long time reported out to you, what we all had, what we have open for capital projects. So I wanted to develop a summary sheet that you could see, these are all the active projects that we have in play right now. And I think if I was to ask 17 of you, you would give me 17 answers on how many capital projects we had. So I thought it might be important to at least show you, these are all the ones that we have going on.
But the one's open 20 years.
So they're the five that I promised you this morning I was gonna talk to you about. Project 82. We sent to finance and we're gonna close that one. That'll be $70,000 that goes back to the county road fund. Project 81 has $120,000 going back to the county road fund. Project 88. So what I want to do with project 88 is that project was open years ago and we track all of the public safety, emergency safety grants in there. New World gives us the ability for any capital project that was created after we went live, which was, my data starts in 2014. If I run a life-to-date report, I can show you a life-to-date report for all these projects. So what I would like to do is, when Glenn and Tim finish the grant that they're in right now, I want to close that project. And when they get their next award, open up a new project so that the reporting in New World can be, I think, a little bit more substantial to you all when you want or need a report, or more importantly, or as importantly, when Tim and Glenn need a report. Right now, the way we report on that capital project is a little wonky because you've got to grab it from a couple of different places. So if we were to start a new project, they would be able to do a life-to-date report in New World, and that would be really beneficial, but that won't happen until they finish the current grant cycle they're in. Project 118. I want to close that one, and that only has $22 left in it. And oh, wait a minute, the one I misspoke. So 82, the first one, that 70,000 isn't going back to County Road. That's the fire training center. So that's the one of public safety. I said to make Tim and Glenn more comfortable with the closure of the project, we could take that $70,000, send it back to general fund, and either put it in contingency or put it right in the fire. So we created a department in our budget now where all the operation and maintenance are. So you could give them a 0.2 capital expenditure line in the general fund budget for this amount in case a capital investment was required in that this year. Or you could just leave it in contingency and make Tim and Glenn come to you when there's a proposal for a capital improvement, which might be a better, that option is more appealing to me because they'll have to come to you with the proposal and you'll have to approve the proposal. If you just put it in their budget, they'd have the ability to just pull the trigger on it. Now, to Tim and Glenn's credit, they wouldn't do that. But if you funded them with this money, they could, in theory, send equipment across to Brian and move forward. If you put it in contingency, at least they have to give you a presentation of how they want to spend it.
But if we all go to support those changes, they might have to get to that one. That's what, that would be the one reason why I would see the line in the fire would be better, because then when 15 out of 17 are gone and the 2 left are senile, then they would say, well, we deserve this 70,000, and they would be right, we'd be like, no.
So no, I take it right back to general fund. This place is a disaster. It's only grant
We're just
funded.
over here, I think.
Nobody uses it. I wouldn't leave the money there at all. We spend good with public safety when they need something. It's not that big a number that I wouldn't just take it.
They're showing signs.
So if,
But I'm sure you want to do something for them. That's it, you talked to them.
well, and again, if you put it in contingency, it's just as good as putting it in fund balance.
Right, it will roll over at the end of the year. It will be.
If you don't use it, it goes into my fund balance anyway.
Right.
So I'm
I'm like one or the other, I'm just saying that we make decisions sometimes, not remembering we're not gonna be here forever.
So the problem, if I put it in their budget, it will expire on 12/31.
Well, and the other,
Oh, okay, yeah.
Cassie, if you saw where this was,
What do you say?
if you've seen where this actual project
Have you been,
is.
have you been there?
It's with Warren in Washington County. It's in the hole in the woods, in the middle.
I've heard about it.
Nowhere.
Around.
And if they ever had an economic development thing, the thing would disappear and it would be a new Walmart or Costco. So it's not like Either side's doing a lot.
Oh, and some of the towns do their own thing now, I think.
Well, a
Fort
lot,
Edward does
yeah,
it.
a lot of them came back
I think
home.
because it's awfully hard for the volunteers to all get together and get that.
And it's even
far.
hard for Warren County to go there too,
And I don't know that it ever became,
what they expected it to be.
right, so the
No.
center itself hasn't been developed into what it was going to be at the beginning anyway. Right now, you can't have any controlled burns or anything like that up there, it's just smoke bombs or whatever they do.
And you use propane for the fire to get the smoke.
Okay, so when do you wanna close?
I'm sorry?
When do you wanna close?
Well, the good news is you took all the actions this morning, I'm just recapping that.
Okay, good.
So there's 4 of them that I wanna close now and one that I wanna close when the grant's done. And you took action on those this morning. Just kind of recap. So, back to the beginning. And we'll do this as quickly as. So, let me rephrase this. My part of it's going to be, my part of it will be quick. Where the conversation goes will be up to you. So general fund. Two of the things that I want to bring to your attention because they're the 2 things that keep me up at night. You see a drastic reduction in our cash. And more importantly, on the back of that page, the line that I told you to concentrate on, that unassigned, unappropriated, went from 22.8 to 13.2. Now, some of that is the ridiculous deferred tax revenue entry that I tell you about every year that I can't stand. And so the comptroller makes me do an entry every year that looks at all of our unpaid taxes. And the ones that are still owed to us becomes a liability to the county. And I have to chew away. So if you levy, you'll notice when you get to the real taxes on here, it says 35.9 million or whatever. That's not the number that you left.
Right.
So it was like $1 million hit. At least $1 million hit to your revenue account. Because of the taxes that I had to defer that hadn't been collected yet. So that has an impact on your fund balance. There was also $3 million that you took from the 2023 surplus and transferred it in 24. So $3 million of that loss was money from 23 that you spent in 24. So even though it's a $9 million loss, $4 million of it was the planned usage of the 3 and the $1 million nonsense entry that I have to do for the county. So that leaves you with the $5 million that we kind of know the source of most of that $5 million. Brian has brought it to your attention quite often in the past couple of months. It's almost exactly the number that department, missed the mark by. But it is what it is. Problem is we have a fund balance policy, now we're under that number. So for 2026, and Brian's already laid the foundation for this, you're gonna have some really, really uncomfortable decisions. Because even if you find efficiencies, even if you find cuts, we can't, this is borderline, I would call this yellow flag area for me, right? You can't go much lower than this without affecting my daily operations.
Yeah, that cash number is ridiculously low.
There is a relationship between this fund balance number and the cash number that I have to operate. So there's not much lower that you can go. We burn through about $3 million a month. And you should never have less than 2 to 3 months operating ever, at any time during the year. And you gotta remember the beginning of the year is when you're the most flush. So if you're low on cash in July, that's not good. If you're low on cash in December, you're gonna be flush again in February. And you just gotta make it a couple of months, but the policy that you all set was 20% of operating, which right now is, $22 million. We're a far cry from $22 million. So and I talked about in County Road, not only is Brian gonna have to make up the increases he knows about, but he also has to make up the 1.2 you have that same scenario happening in general fund, but on a much larger. So not only does Brian have to come up with the new social services number, whatever that is, God help us. Not only does he have to come up with there's going to be salary increases. We've negotiated some of them. There's 2 more underway right now that you can only imagine what the number will be. We have an idea what the ask is gonna be, right? Then you have CSEA and non-union, the 2 biggest part of your workforce coming up. So not only does he have to plan for it, whatever the new social services number is, the negotiated and non-negotiated payroll increases that we know are gonna happen. But he has to take this $3.8 million that you see in front of you, and at least 2.8 of that has to be gapped. Because again, the budget isn't balanced until, in my opinion, until you get down to at least $1 million. So he can't appropriate that number again. It's not there. He can't take 3.8 from that $13 million. I'll panic. I'll come to you with whiter hair than I have now. So he can't take that money again. So not only does he have to fund the increases that he knows about, he's got to find a way to bridge this $2.8 million gap because he can't appropriate that again. It took $3.8 million to balance general fund for this year. He can't do that a second time. So he's got to find 2.8 before he even starts the 26 budget. And then add to that the things that he knows about. And that's before the departments come in with any of their asks. So I think that's why he's tried to lay a foundation. The first number he threw out was 13. The new number seems to be 20 to 22. And I don't know that he's wrong. Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of discussion. I hope you are the most engaged this year that you have been ever. Now, you all participate in different levels every year. But I hope that you are engaged this year like never before. Brian's going to need you. Dave?
So the other thing I was noticing you're going through, if you look at the total liabilities, see some substantial increases over last year. General fund's up over $1 million.
No, it's up 100,000.
Okay. Somewhere significant, Work County Road Fund, liabilities up by 500K.
Please hold.
Pardon?
Please hold. So a
County
lot
road
of,
machinery's up by 116.
a lot of the county road increase though was in payables. So 24 bills that were paid in 25. So that's a little bit misleading too, because it's just bills that didn't make it in the December audit that were paid in January.
That might have happened the year before though, too.
It could have, well, it happens every year just on
Right.
different.
Different levels, different amounts.
Okay.
Now, what's the taxes receivable? Is that stuff that we're still owed that has to come in? And if it is, how come we're up $1.5 million? Is that the economy?
No auction.
So that's how I was gonna end general fund. The one piece of good news I have in general. And then we can take the conversation wherever you want, or we can be done. Brian may have something to add. The one piece of good news that I will tell you in general fund, that nonsense entry that I told you about that I can't stand will actually play to our favor this time. Because right now, I have the auction scheduled for September 10th to the 14th or 10th to the 24th. It's a 2-week online auction. The beautiful thing about the fact that we're finally having an auction, 3 years of delinquent taxes by hook or by crook are gonna be off our books. Whether we make more or less isn't gonna matter. They're gonna be off our books. So with that tax receivable off our books, it also decreases that tax liability. So this will be 1 year where that entry actually gives back to fund balance. So some of that stuff that was deferred and made the fund balance go down will actually now be realized, even if it's a loss. It's weird to say that even a loss is to our benefit because it's off the books.
Because it's not
So
not a negative, it's a
Yeah.
loss, but it's not the big negative.
Right.
But it's off the books either
But
way.
it's a revenue also on the negative, so if it doesn't meet the tax, we get that money, right?
No.
I thought they only got the surplus.
Yeah, but we eat the deficits.
Right. So if the thing brings 5,000 and it was owed 7, they don't get any money back, but we did get the 5.
Yes, that's true.
So it
That's
is-
true. I heard you, I heard
Yeah.
something different.
So you're still getting some revenue, you might get 10 cents on the dollar, but it's better than
But
nothing.
again, under the.
So if you're out 12 million, you get 1.2 million, you're a little bit better.
Under the category that the good decisions you've made. Another gold star moment for the board is about 3 years ago, maybe more. You used to budget $400,000 to $500,000 a year in auction surplus. Right? Every year you knew you're gonna get a decent amount of money. We almost always got, so some properties would bring in, some properties would bring less. Well, as a whole, the auction almost always brought a surplus, and I have a little summary of, like, it's like a 20-year summary of all the auctions and the surpluses that were obtained from. You stopped, you as the board, along with Brian, stopped budgeting for that number. Before the COVID even happened, you stopped budgeting for that number. So now, if there is any money that comes in as a surplus, that's gotta go back to the, so what I guess what I'm saying is, you took the reliance on that money out of the budget. So the Hennepin case for Washington County isn't as catastrophic because you already didn't count on that money to begin with. That money just went into my fund balance. Unbudgeted revenue just goes to my fund balance. So you didn't, so unlike sales tax and property tax, you took away the reliance on that surplus out of your budget. So now that I have to give the surplus back, it doesn't hurt you as bad because you didn't rely on it to begin with.
It's Christmas money.
Yes, we just didn't account for it.
I relied on it for my fund balance, but you didn't need it for your operation. So it's not as catastrophic to us as people who actually had that number built into their budget and now had to find, a different way.
Now, on that first sheet, what's the remarkable difference on the other funds?
Do two other funds,
From other funds.
do from other funds?
Yes.
Most of that, Chairman, is Marshall money that we have out in bridges that hasn't come back yet. Because we had two large bridges going at the same time. We had Shushin and Granville.
Right.
At the same time, which were two large bridges, which normally we have one large one at a time. So we had a couple big ones at a time this time. So that money will, so part of the reason that my cash is down is because we're owed a bunch of money
Yeah.
from the bridges.
That's pretty substantial.
Yeah, sure.
And that should be coming.
So I've already paid back, so if I gave you the same sheet today, it looks a little bit better than this. Because some of that money I have gotten back since the close of the year,
Mostly all highway.
mostly you highway. If not 100%.
Yeah, so the worst thing with the budget is I remember the first 4 budgets I did, you had to worry about what supervisors wanted, and after a while, you soon caught on that no matter how you did the budget, you had to budget for what your citizens and taxpayers needed, no matter what supervisors wanted. So you had to change your whole philosophy and write it for the use of the taxpayer, not for the use of what supervisors wanted. But when you're that new and that young, you kind of don't catch on near as fast. You do catch on fast, but the hard way. So I've always tried to do things with the taxpayer in mind. So if you think I've been harsh in DSS, it's not harsh on DSS. I'm actually being harsh on myself because of what we allowed to happen to our taxpayers. This never should have happened. And I thought the best thing I saw out of the meeting last Wednesday, and I thank Melissa for putting that together, was the guy actually saying that once you know your revenue isn't coming, it's just like taking away an appropriation. It's spent. Take away the revenue. And I think that going down to the general ledger level and seeing what DSS knew and when, even if they didn't actually know, they're just making entries. I can't foresee how they wouldn't have known. But even if they didn't know, and you see the entry levels, that was in the last week of July and the first couple of days of August, was a difference of $1 million, which was brought to us after we already had the preliminary budget out, after I had actually presented the budget. So the problem there is that's about to happen again, which is good news because we'll know before we go into the budget whether that actually happens or not.
We'll be watching for it this time.
But since we don't know what caused it, and I only took in the ledger, I took the ones that actually say ceiling, because that means they hit a cap. And originally I thought, well, I'm thinking it's the last year's carryover. Well, once I got down into the ledgers, it gives you the actual dates that they amount for. So they've already amounted, which should be good news. They've amounted for everything in 24 up through to July. The year before, there was none in 23. So it was July to September of 23 was 770,000. That was the carryover from the prior year before. That was the big killer. That was half of the ceiling, because the ceiling was only 1.3 million. So the other ones were actually all up to date in 24. So then the question is, what changed? Well, if you looked at the budget, and I know I asked the question when we did finance, and I'm gonna go back and watch that actual Zoom meeting. The number increased about $5 million on the appropriation side. So I don't know if the ceiling is caused by what we appropriate, or if it's caused by some other form in a formula that the federal government has for Title 20. That I don't know, because I've asked all the questions and really have got no answers, so I can't figure that out on my own. But it's possible that they realize that, and is why the appropriations is 5 million more, because maybe that does reset that ceiling. I have no way of knowing that.
Our hope is that the number that they have in for 25
Is
has the right size.
It's so big that it right size where the ceiling's at. No way of knowing. I'll see when we see the actual reconciliation.
The other scary thing was the $1 million that he's talking about last year was, and I'm not supposed to say the word clawback because I keep being political.
The reconciliation.
It's a clawback.
Same as sales.
They took money from me. I don't care what you call it. It's a clawback.
You did call it a reconciliation.
Listen.
Sales tax.
It is a reconciliation.
So sales tax is reconciled. They clawed back social services. Anyway, but that clawback, the word I'm not supposed to use, was actually from a period that ended September of 23. So my
777.
my inner witchy twitch is twitching because I'm afraid that there's another one. Because that only reconciled us through September of 23.
Right.
We're about to get a reconciliation through September of 24.
For that same July to September
For that
of
same-
24. So they might have fixed the 25 stuff, so the 24 stuff was half of it. But the 25 might have a 24 reconciliation. So that's what we're working
And
on.
we'll probably be about to find that out.
But the thing of it is, there has to be some way. Right now, we're trying to figure out what the hell happens. You know, or what our level is, and then we're deciding maybe it's what we appropriated. It's the federal government, they must have regulations about that, some freaking where. Someone's gotta be able to tell us.
Well, the first letter I sent to NICEAG to ask that question, the letter we got back from that association said our commissioner could tell us. And so I posed the question to the commissioner, and the commissioner won't tell us.
It's not
whether-
well, I don't think any of us freaking know, but it's
But I
gotta
think
be,
they should know.
well, somebody should know, but we can't freaking figure it out here. When we try, I mean, there's gotta be something on the federal level, maybe we gotta go to Gillibrand or somebody and say, hey, we need stuff.
What we really have to delve into, Chairman, is we're keep being told you can't control who comes through the door.
Right.
What we have to find out is what then can we control? Because if there are, if we if we provide services to 300 homeless people during the year, and only 80 of those are a demographic that we're required to provide to, but our Washington County homeless plan says we're not only going to do the children that we're required to help. This is the group of people and this is the requirements that will fall under our homeless plan. So what we need to find out is, do we have a homeless plan that does things that are our choice? Right? Have we chosen to help people because it's the right thing to do and not because it's mandated? That's an important question to get an answer to. Because if only 20% of the people that we helped are mandated, we chose 80% of that cost increase as a county. And maybe you would still make that decision as a human being, but you should know whether or not you have discretion or not.
But the federal government has some way of knowing that they think we owe them $777,000.
So the feds flow through the state reconciles the claims.
And they decide, the state actually.
The state actually
decides.
decides.
Somebody has to have a formula that says you owe us this much money.
And that's what he's trying to find.
And I wanted them, I couldn't,
I guarantee they haven't told them downstairs what the hell it is. I guarantee it, it's the same.
what I
I
don't
think their
understand.
big system spits it out and they just have to trust whatever spits out of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
Because the big
but someplace we ought to be able to ask.
Well, they must know what they put in for. They must know what they asked for. We have the numbers that show what they said you're not getting.
Yeah.
So you could subtract that number from every number they asked for
And find
and
a
you
ceiling.
would find it. But they never asked Al to come down and look. They sure as hell didn't ask me to come down and look. Well, I don't blame them for that. I don't know why it wasn't just provided at the time that they recognized it. That's what I don't get.
But maybe what the chairman's saying is maybe the battle we need to have is at the state level to
Right.
find out who at the state.
Yeah.
I tried that first.
They sent it back to the
You went-
commissioner,
you
but
went
I think
through
we need to maybe take it.
You went through the association.
Yeah.
I think we need to take it.
Go through the comptrollers.
So there's a couple of alphabet soups at the state, OCFS and
Well, I tried-
OPD or whatever.
I tried the comptroller's office when we were at finance school and he
I think we
basically
need to
told
take a
me
second
he
bite
couldn't
of the
be-
state. The state, I think we need to take a second bite of the state funders for answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to actually go to the 4 different groups of DSS at the state level.
And I think maybe if we went to one of our representatives and set up a meeting with them.
Maybe that's the
You've been trying to say.
what I'm trying to say here. I think that's what we've gotta.
So
They're out of
those,
session and they're campaigning.
those two primary funding sources for DSS. If one of our representatives could get a sit down with us, with one of their fiscal people. Right, I would gladly go to Albany and sit down with somebody from Office of Children and Family
Yeah, if you
Services.
give me a fiscal person, yeah.
If you give me a fiscal person from that alphabet soup to sit
Yeah.
down with, explain to me how this claim process works. Because our fiscal officer, who I trust with all my heart, has told me I have to put in the claim even if I know it's over the ceiling. She's told me that.
Yeah.
That whatever comes out of that system, she has to submit. And then, and knowing that it's going to get reduced. That's a terrible, terrible process.
Yeah, but it actually helps you understand the cuts that are in place from the federal to the state. Because the state has used that to get federal money to offset everything they don't wanna pay for.
And I think that would
And
show
that's
though,
really sad.
if you sat down with a fiscal officer that has no political gain to have,
That would be
it
incredible.
would be incredible.
Yeah. Incredible.
You're gonna get more answers at the state level than you will internally.
That's what I think.
And I don't mean that disrespectfully to our commission. I mean, the state is the one who's actually working the numbers through.
Yeah.
On what's allowed and
They
what's.
said, well, you owe us this much money, we're taking it.
To your point, somebody in Albany is cranking it up,
Yeah,
right? So
Question.
who's that person?
exactly.
And it's not even the comptroller, it's somebody at that alphabet soup.
Yeah, maybe.
Because they send their audited claim to the comptroller.
But if you got told that they're putting it in knowing they're over their cap, that means they know where their cap is too.
Well, what she told me was, I have to put in whatever spit out,
Yeah.
It does.
knowing that some of it could be denied.
So Al, the two that you just talked about, Office of Children and Families, is Department of Ed involved in that? ESS?
OTDA is the other one, OTDA, OCFS. Those two alphabet soups would be the two that I would love to have a conversation. So
July 1st, well, not September.
OTDA, I think, is the primary driver of
So
the
that's
clawback.
now to September 1st.
It's all Title 20 money.
It's all
but I
Title
don't
20 money.
know Which is which is federal, but it probably includes a little bit of
So there's,
each of those.
it appears from where we're sitting, two things happen. We hit a Title 20 ceiling that we don't know what the ceiling is. And there was a shift from Title 20 eligible people to safety net eligible people.
So
So
they
people,
still pay a portion.
so whether, instead of being 75 or 50% funded, it was only 29%. So every time somebody falls out of Title 20 and goes into safety net, it costs the county significant more local share money. So I think those two things happen together. And it creates a significant number. And then there's, the other thing is they're so far behind, right? So last July, they clawed back $1 million from September of 23. Mr. Tall was in on a meeting that we had with DSS about right size. We're gonna restructure their budget so that it's a net cost by funding and not by departments. So right now, foster care and childcare, you see the expenses, but you don't see the revenues attached to it. You're going to see it that way in the very near future. What we found out in that meeting, it was hard to swallow, but we do get some admin money back from the state for providing these services. The problem is, and we found out in that meeting, it could be 18 months from now before we even know what that admin money is. They'll decide, based on our case mix and what was eligible and what other counties had needs greater than ours. So all of the admin that we do in 24, we won't even get an admin payment reconciliation by program until late. My understanding, if I heard them right, is in late 25. So it crosses fiscal year, so you have no way to keep the revenue with the expense.
If you go down in the ledger, you see that, you're like, wow, it's just unfathomable that they've created such a
But we did find out that
crazy system.
they do tell DSS the breakdown of the admin, so we found out some new data. So we do know when they get admin money, how much of that was Medicaid related, how much of that was child support related, so they do get a breakdown of what programs generated them, which will be helpful. I think you also have brought to light a new concern that there's millions and millions of dollars that flow through this building that you don't audit.
That's,
I think that's a new concern, that's a
That's
legitimate
scary.
concern.
yeah.
And Brian brought that up at the meeting last week. The commissioner's response was, well, we're audited by the state, but you all have the fiduciary responsibility. And I think that
They're two separate audits.
the guy
One
from
audit is to make sure they're doing what the state requires. Our audit is where the hell the money go.
So
They're two different audits.
and I think the guy from the comptroller's office had an interesting compromise. He didn't think there was any reason that you, as your audit committee of the board, couldn't be presented with a report each month of the monies that were dispersed. So there's a way for them to report to the board what they dispersed without. So the reason you don't see those is because it's a very you're not allowed to see who the clients are. Right? So you could never see a check register from their department. That wouldn't be okay. It's confidential who's
Right.
receiving the benefits. So what you could see is a line that said benefits issued, 872,000 without names. What you could see on that report though is non-client vendors. Hotels, taxi cabs. So there are vendors that they pay that you would have a right to see. And maybe that information is useful to you. So we will be working with the commissioner on the audit committee going forward. We'll see something. We don't know what yet, but I think even the commissioner is on board with providing you something. I think that the struggle right now is what can she give you that doesn't require another 3 days of staff time, right?
Well, it's probably something they already have.
But everything they have includes client names, so
Right.
they have to scrub somehow the data that they have. Yeah. So the commissioner is open to that process.
We should also know the number of clients we're serving, even though we can't know the name.
Well, that's what I mean. You could have a generic line.
And you do get that in the annual report, so
We
you know
should
they
have
have
a
that.
Weekly basis, number of new admits, number of.
Right.
Like those.
And
Number
the
of
other,
appeals waiting to be appealed.
And I think some of that census data, would be appropriate at the HHS committee. I think what the
very
audit
appropriate.
committee should see is disbursements.
Right,
Right, we wanna know who's getting money from the county and state, in our county.
you mentioned that. Are they all in the county? I mean, are we servicing somebody out of our county?
Your homes.
Is anybody checking that, or is there?
They're homeless where.
So they're homeless where found, so if we.
So if Warren County brings them over, they're here, they're ours.
If they come knocking on our door,
Well, how can they,
Yeah, but I think you said, I think there was a line I saw somewhere in the services, so if they live in Washington County and they. You have to continue to serve them until the last day of first full month after they leave.
You know,
So if they leave on the 5th of June, you have to service it 31st of July.
so that's something that they're checking?
yes, their caseworkers are reviewing that kind of stuff. yes.
and when they walk in the door, they ask, where did you spend last night? Where did you
Right.
spend the week before?
Gotcha.
They try to build, where's family?
Right.
What have you been doing? Why are you doing today?
But another thing that's not part of what you asked, but related. Most of the people that we're serving out of county. So they may be county residents, but we've got them sheltered in Warren County for the most part.
Nearly $3 million, and I think 2 million went to Warren County.
Use that
Which county?
use that electronic sign better. ESS 20 miles east.
Which comes to the argument that if we're looking at spending, you know, $750,000 every year, $1 million on that, should we be owning one or two warming houses for,
We should see for public-private partnerships, for sure. So
you know, right, something there, should we be owning and having somebody else? So that a lot of the individuals, I mean, why would you come here and you lay in a 10-room bed outfit? Might discourage you a little more than you're going in a $250 a night hotel every night over in the middle of Lake George where you can walk around.
And some of
I'm
the-
sorry, but
I
that's
just
just,
don't want them to be.
that's
right next
just-
to the cannabis dispenser stuff.
You should go on a visit.
Well, that way they're happy, they'd be happy if they never got in the hotel.
We can have big cards for that.
And I think some of the stays are actually pretty long-term too, if I remember.
Yes, some
And
are.
once we pay, the hotel pays to fix it, we don't pay to repair the damage, so hotels do, we had the house. We
Well, they,
just.
yeah, they should pay to repair it. We're paying for it being repaired, even if it's not broke.
It's extra.
Then there's blood. And cargo containers.
You put tents out there.
can we talk to Skimmerhorn? Maybe we cut a deal with them.
That's what I said, you know, have a perk, you know, there's some kind of perks where you get.
You know,
You have to give us 200.
The only downside of a public-private partnership is if you build it, they will come and down.
That's the problem.
You don't wanna put up a vacancy sign in theory.
Albany
But right
County
now,
does-
they're getting luxury combinations.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't exactly call them that, but they are, definitely a public-private. You know,
Exactly.
Yeah, but the bigger problem is,
We're paying one guy to run motels for us all over the goddamn 2 or 3 counties. Now Fort Edward's trying to make it so we can't use them.
well, and that's the bigger problem here. We were trying to expand tourism. And if you- For the bed and breakfasts and your short-term rentals, you'd have no tourism because we've ruined every community motel there is.
And we have cells that are, what if they use
Yeah,
the?
and don't worry.
consent cells?
Well, yeah, they have to stay in Warren County.
They're actually better than the.
Places
hotels
are
are.
trashed. I
Yeah,
get
we're,
that.
we're way up. Cassie's right, we're way up.
Yeah, yeah. we're-
They stayed in one.
Can we adjourn from Al's meeting?
Let's stay in that hill.
Do you have any questions?
Not for Al.
The one thing that I will remind you, that you all forget, well, 2 of you don't forget. My door is always open. If there's something that you wanna ask me, you don't wanna ask me right now, come see me. You all can come see me anytime. You're more than welcome.
do that.
And hopefully everybody will be here next week for interviews. I think this is gonna be the biggest appointment we've had in all the time I've been here, because I think what you don't realize is all the big departments have elected officials except this one.
I think Melissa's point was kind of important.
It's an important side, but it doesn't handle near the amount of money or liability as this one does.
I don't know about
I
that.
think it does. I think there's a lot more liability in this.
I think this hire is as important as your choice for administrator. Absolutely.
58.5% of our taxes raised last year went to this department.
So we can say no on all of them.
You'd say no on all of them, but you probably need one quicker than later before they're all gone.
Well, then we won't be spending the money. will we?
Well, just remember, if you don't pick somebody, the default department head is the chairman of the board. Just saying. I meant that as a joke. I meant that as a joke.
Oh, you did.
I was thinking.
That's what I thought, but
It's cheetah.
we have to select somebody from DSS as a secretary. We cannot appoint me. Ha ha ha.
Are we prepared?
Hey, we're adjourned.
You're the best code enforcement officer